Trevor Khan.
Mr President, I rise to speak on the news today that unemployment across Australia has risen to 5.2% over the last month, and that in New South Wales it has jumped to 5.8%. Across the country, over 53,000 people have lost their jobs. We are now in the sad situation where, along with South Australia, New South Wales is the worst performing state or territory in the country. Put another way, on this measure of economic performance, we are economic bottom dwellers. The fact is, because of the state Labor government's failure to develop the necessary infrastructure and climate for robust business activity, the impact of the current crisis falls far harsher upon the people of New South Wales than elsewhere in the nation. The simple reality is that if it was not for the historical accident that Sydney was the birthplace of the Australian nation, and therefore many companies are headquartered here, our economy would be in an even bigger basket case than it currently is. Rather than, as we have seen today, this state Labor government engaging in yet more spin on the state of the New South Wales economy, what we should see is an honest admission that this state Labor government has failed the people of New South Wales. Mr President, what I want to do is to relate this failure to achieve nation average employment outcomes back to the personal level, so that we just don't talk about numbers, as we have seen the Premier and the Treasurer do today. I want to talk about people. Back in 1981, I was the personnel officer of the Botany Mill of what was then known as Australian Paper Manufacturers and is now Amcor. The company operated two paper machines on the site, both producing boxboard for the corrugated box market. Unfortunately, in 1981, bad times struck the mill. There was a collapse in the market, with the demand for boxboard falling dramatically. As a result, there was a need to shed a whole shift worth of employees from the mill. I will never forget the day that the retrenchments were announced. During the day, as employees came to work for the commencement of their shifts, they were told the grim news. One of those was so shaken that during his shift he accidentally got his arm caught in the size press of the No. 7 paper machine, losing a number of fingers and causing massive damage to his arm. I knew that man. I had employed him. I can remember his face. I know his name. I can actually still visualise his employment application. Whilst he was slowly recovering from the serious injuries he sustained at the mill that day, he, whilst depressed, took a gun and shot himself. Perhaps the events that led to the death of him were more extreme than in most cases, but the simple reality is that employment helps define people. It creates a purpose in life, it creates opportunity and hope, and the loss of employment can be and is materially and emotionally destructive. People who lose their jobs face enormous pressures. People lose their homes, they lose their cars and other material possessions. People sometimes lose their marriages. They are likely to suffer poorer health outcomes than those in employment. For some, it is not only results in the immediate loss of employment, but impacts upon both them and their family in a way that leads to long-term, if not chronic, unemployment. People deserve our respects and acknowledgement that when we talk of unemployment rates, we're actually talking of human tragedies. Could I close by noting that during my time working at the Botany Mill, I met and worked with many, many fine people. Amongst those in the production area were such fine people as Henry Purcell and Peter Leonard. Amongst the maintenance supervisors were people like Steve O'Rourke. In my own section, there was the personnel manager, Barry Simmons, who had to put up with a lot from me, and of course my direct superior and friend, Harold Dennis. But of course, there were many others, and I particularly note two union delegates with whom I did not always agree, but in reality they were very fine men who made their own very significant contribution to the operation of the mill. Amongst those, from the Pulp and Paper Workers Federation as it then was Phil Illich, and from what was then the Metal Workers Union was a grand man by the name of Les Bird. In these difficult times, I send my heartfelt regards to all those who continue to work at the Botany Mill, and I hope and trust all of them remain in employment in the coming months. I have no doubt that despite now having worked away from that mill for over 27 years, it remains a great community of hard-working Australians. Thank you.